Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. Yeah, I'm here to report on the passing of Senator Bob Dole, Republican senator, um, former uh, the running opposition, the Republican nominee in the 2000, in the 1996 presidential election. Go back and check my um, 90s decade in review video uh, for that, for information on that. It was the election of 1996. It was him against Bill Clinton, in which he was unsuccessful. Yeah, he was a senator for a lot of years, like since the 1950s. He was from Kansas, former World War II veteran, so salute him for his service in World War II. Um, what I remember from him, he was the first presidential. Um, 1996 was the first presidential election that I really paid close attention to. And of course, he was running against Bill Clinton, and I'm a Democrat that supported Bill Clinton. My grandma voted for Bill Clinton, didn't vote for Bob Dole at that time. But um, like I said, it was the first election that I really paid close attention to, because 1992, of course, I talked about that story. Um, they asked me in a mock election in preschool I was going to vote for, and I said Bill Clinton, but I didn't really know a lot about politics. But 1996, when Bob Dole ran, I knew a little bit more about politics, and of course, like I said, I didn't support him. My family didn't support his candidacy. We're a Democrat. From a Democratic family, from a Democratic state, so I wasn't going to vote for him, or my family wasn't going to vote for him. I was 12. I wasn't going to vote for anybody. But one thing I respected about him over the years was his moderate approach to politics. As his party became more extreme and the party became more right wing, he stood like in the center. He supported the Americans with Disabilities Act when it was passed in 1992 under President George H.W. Bush, and he was kind of considered a moderate. As his party started to move again, like I said, to the right, he stood in the center. Now, did he get endorsements, especially in the '70s when he first ran? He first ran for vice president in 1976 with Gerald Ford. Again, go back to my um, in the archives, the Sirhan video where I talk about Gerald Ford and how unpopular he was in 1976, and Dole was his running mate. So Dole ran 3 times and was unsuccessful, but I guess because he was considered a moderate, he wasn't considered the hardline conservative that people were looking for. So even within his own party, he wasn't going to get that kind of support. And he was like an old school Republican, like a not a Reagan-esque Republican. Um, During the early 1980s, like I said in other videos, the party moved to the right, and he was kind of out of favor in a sense with the party. And in 1996, by the time he ran, he was boring. Yeah, he did have a. He ran again. Hi, Lisa, what's going on? He ran against Bush Senior. He was one of the running mates that was in contesting with Bush. Bush Senior and Ronald Reagan, because again they were more conservative. They said they were taking the party in a different direction that Dole really wasn't cool with. Republicans took the party in a more right wing direction. But even though they had beef, or they had not beef, but we framed it as beef in the in the language we use, but they were the opposition. They were the other side. So even though they were not in agreement all the time, when Bush Senior passed away, yeah, that was a thing. He did say that. He told Bush Bush Senior never was in combat in World War II. And the thing about Dole and the people that served in World War II, for us as Americans, regardless of any side that you're on, for us as Americans at least, World War II is the war that we love. It's the best war in American history because we were on the right side. We were on the correct side. It was like one of the good wars. It was fought to end genocide. And that ties into um, Bob Dole's record. Bob Dole was one of the first U.S. politicians to ever recognize the Armenian genocide as happening, to call out the genocide of Albanians in the in the 90s and early 2000s, and to advocate for the war in Kosovo under President Clinton to free the Kosovar Albanians. So he was always against genocide, no matter where it was, and against ethnic cleansing, no matter where it was. But what I was saying, at least, was that when President George H.W. Bush passed away, even though they had that animosity and they kind of said bad things about each other during the campaigns, and it was heated during, especially the 1980 campaign, for the quote that you said. Even though that happened in 2019 when President Bush passed away, Dole, at his advanced age, stood up out of his wheelchair to pay respects to the president. So it was kind of showing that people, even though they have disagreements with each other, even though they're the opposition to each other, even though they disagree vehemently, it's a respect shown for um, fellows in arms. You know what I mean? We're both soldiers. We both have a respect, even though we disagree with each other. There was a common respect shown, and Dole was like this with a lot of people that he was in political oppositions against. In 1996, against President Clinton, he uh, he disagreed with him vehemently, but they net they went back and forth, vicious attacks against each other, real competitive stuff. But when it came time to support the president in 1998 to go to war to free the Kosovar Albanians and to capture Slobodan Milosevic, again, go back to the 90s video, he was in support of it. So he was always in support. I mean, he was always against genocide, ethnic cleansing, and things of that nature. And again, me personally, I respect him because he was support he supported the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1992. He was one of the advocates for the Americans with Disabilities Act. So he gets my respect for that. and he also gets my respect for his service again. And like I said, what is considered as the good war, the war that most Americans, I don't know any Americans really, that would say that we should have been in World War II. They asked him that was something that they asked him about with Trump. It's a famous video where his pants is pulled all the way up, and he wasn't going to speak against Trump at that time because the party line, but he didn't support Trump's uh, tactics and the negative, the negativity that um, Trump was no pun intended doling out. Um, but he was an old school Republican. He wasn't going to support that kind of thing. What I meant that he had some endorsements that some people might consider a little bit sketchy was that he had Thurman's endorsement. And Strong Thurman, of course, we know famous segregationist, switch parties, had the famous line where he said in the 1948 Democratic National Convention that he would not support um, black people in the pools and the movies, and he wouldn't support integration. And unfortunately, we're going to speak real. Dole had his endorsement, so that doesn't reflect well on Dole. You know, you got to speak the real, the negative as well as the positive. It can't fuck with you on that, Senator Dole, when it came to that. You know, so that's a grade down. Another grade down, but when he was in his younger years, was he cheated on his wife with the woman that became his second wife. That's the that's the truth. You know what I mean? They admitted to that. She was his secretary, and he cheated on his first wife with his second wife, who was his secretary. So that's a strike against him. And was he a little bit racist? I don't doubt that he probably was, because we're talking about an individual that was around, a white individual, white man, who was around at the time when there was heavy racism. Is it a right thing? No. You know, we know better at this time. No apologies for him. You know, not caping for him or taking up for him in any type of way. But it just is what it is. You know what I mean? He had an unsavory endorsement. He had some things that he had said that was not wouldn't align with today's political culture. Of course not. Like when he said in 1976 that if we took all the wounded and dead Democrats um, up, we'd be able to fill up the whole of Detroit, Michigan. In those days, and even now, you got to say stuff. You got to say things in a political game that you don't necessarily mean, especially when you're running in the primaries. You got to play up to your base. Unfortunately, that is what politics is. And we know that at that time, in the 1960s and 70s, when Dole was heavily involved, when he was a lot younger, when he was running in the political world, The whole point that was the Republicans wanted to gain that hardcore Democratic support that was the racist support. They wanted to gain the Dixiecrats that were not satisfied with the Republican Party anymore because excuse me, the Democratic Party anymore because the Democratic Party was moving to the left and embracing African American civil rights. And Republicans were like, oh, well, if the poor whites in the South are going to not vote for us not vote for the Democrats, we want to pick them up. So how do we do that? We appeal to their racism in a silent type of way. You know, what they call a dog whistle. Why they call it a dog whistle? Because you, they know what they're saying. The base knows what they're saying, and the African American community knows what they actually mean, but they say something completely different. So they might say, well, we're going to cut welfare, but really they know that these cuts in welfare affect the African American community more than they affect the white community. So what they're really saying is they're really trying to equate welfare users and abusers with the African American community, but they can't outright say that. So they say it in a slick sort of way. They say it without saying it. And that was what they called the Southern strategy. And that was the strategy of Republicans in the 1960s and 70s to pick up those white racist voters that used to be Democrats. They were, again, unsatisfied with um, with the turn in the 60s that the Democrats were making towards the African American community. Because for over 100 years, the Democratic Party was the party of the racists, the ones who supported the South in the Civil War. It was the Solid South. The South, believe it or not, was at one time known to be completely Democratic. So during this time, during these years in the 60s and 70s, Dole kind of did appeal to the harder core of the base. But in the 90s, when I first knew about him, he had softened his mold and he wasn't about that anymore. And when he wasn't about that anymore, Republicans were like, oh, he's too old school style. He's not going hard. Like in 1994, 1996, 97, when the government shut down because of the combativeness between Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton. He wasn't going negative no more. He was old, so he wasn't hardcore soldiering anymore. And when he had a change of heart and a change of mindset, and he wasn't on that type of time no more, Republicans would like, oh well, he's not he's not a soldier for us anymore. And that happens a lot, particularly with Republican politicians, where they'll say some slick shit in their youth. They'll say some racist shit in their youth. Even President Bush, right? Even McCain will say some slick shit when they're a little bit younger, and then when they become older, they're like, "Oh, well, we're not going to go that negative no more." But you started off with negativity, so yeah, he was 98 years old. He said, "Yeah." So unfortunately, I mean, this is the reality that we deal with here in the United States. This is a country that, from the very beginning, started off as a racist country. So a lot of times, unfortunately, they deal we deal with ugly, the ugly history of discrimination and racism that is a part of our society, is an ingrained part of our society, because you can't start off unequal and then expect equality to come out of that. You started off ugly, so how can you make pretty out of that? You can eventually get rid of it, but you can't really get rid of it in 200 years. So by the time Dole was coming up, and even Reagan and Bush and all these old politicians, yeah, they had a little bit of racism in them. You know, I'm not gonna disparage the man completely in his death. I mean, rest in peace to him. We all died, and we all got to deal with the mistakes and the good and the bad that we made in our lives. But I'm not gonna sit here and say that he was the perfect person. He was the paragon of virtue either. I mean, he was what he was. You know what I mean? Like, he was a human being with faults and a product of his society. He wasn't no saint, and he wasn't completely evil either. You know, he, like most individuals in any society, they're somewhere on a scale between Jesus Christ and Hitler. You know, we're not Jesus Christ, and when nobody is as good as Jesus Christ, and nobody is as good as Adolf Hitler. I mean, as evil as Adolf Hitler, but they fall somewhere in between the scale of that, of being that good versus being that evil. You know what I mean? Now, some of the people that now, of course, in the comment section, you're probably gonna have trolls and shit that are gonna say, "Well, Hitler was completely a good person," or people that might say that Jesus was a completely evil individual. You have to question the morals of somebody that would say that, but most people would agree that Hitler was not a good person, and that Jesus was a perfect person, if not God Himself, according to Christianity. So I think Dole, long story short, Dole kind of falls in between that. Not a perfect person, not a saint, and not a complete scoundrel either. He had some redeeming qualities, and he had some unredeeming, unsavory qualities. He served his country pretty well as a senator and as a soldier, but again, an older man, product of his time, and a product of his unfortunate history of his country. You know, the same country that he served, he embodied some of the negative qualities of it as well. Anyway, you guys can disagree or agree. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, rest in peace to the senator, Senator Dole. I didn't agree with him politically, but as a human being, thank you, Lisa, for contributing. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. And peace.